saying, at the anthropological level, I think one of the most fascinating and persuasive bases for this type of everything is the work of Emmanuel Todd on family structure, where he has different family categories and says that the basic ideological tendencies of different people are very explicable on the basis of their kind of normal family type. And one of his family types is what he calls the absolute nuclear family. And it's very restrictive. It's basically English and Dutch. And he says that this is associated culturally with tendencies to liberalism in what we would now call its libertarian variety. So I think, I'm saying this just to say I think people are different. And just underscoring this thing that this is, I think, an English problem initially. And it becomes a completely other type of problem when it becomes globalized and generalized as a pattern for all human societies. Just to stick to I'm not saying Emmanuel Todd is the alpha and omega of this question at all, but he brings out the absurdity of that globalistic project, of that it's implicitly saying all the peoples of the world should pattern their social existence as if they had an Anglo-Dutch family structure. I mean, it's ultimately a nonsensical and unsustainable, an absurd assumption and an assertion that, seen in those terms of cause cannot lead anywhere good. And the second thing I'll say is individualism, I think, for sure is crucial, but it has different aspects to it. And I think the aspect that is truly crucial and which ties up with the theological structure of Paleo-Liberalism, which I 100% agree is Protestant. I talk consistently about the Anglo-Protestant Whig tradition, an ethnicity, a religion, and an ideology. And all three of those are the same thing seen from different positions. And a way into this, because I think that there's been this bizarre amount of Satanism discussion recently. And so I thought, I know this is a text that is very important to Professor Dugin, and which is in Faust, part 1. I think the Faustian spirit is very much part of this discussion, where Faust summons Mephistopheles and asks him, "Who are you?" And Mephistopheles says, "Ein Teil von jener Kraft, die stets das Böse will und stets das Gute schafft." A portion of that power which always works for evil and affects the good. This is the translation in English, good, which always wants evil, which always works for evil, and always creates the good. So that's Goethe's, if you say, well, what is Satanism? That's Goethe's answer to that. I think it's very interesting. Mandeville's, the consolidation of Paleo-Liberalism in England really takes place in the Scottish Enlightenment. Perhaps the single most perfect distillation of it is found in Mandeville's The Fable of the Bees, which I don't think I can summarize very easily with a quote. I think it's just to say he goes on to influence Adam Smith. And if I could just, a very quick citation from The Wealth of Nations, where Smith says he generally, and he means the individual, he's actually said before, every individual, he generally indeed neither intends to promote the public interest, nor knows how much he is promoting it. By preferring the support of domestic and foreign industry, he intends only his own security, and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain. And he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. And that, to me, is the essential ideological aspect of individualism as it relates to Paleo-Liberalism. That's to say, the fundamental assumption is that there is an empty position, what I call the empty summit, which would be an instantiated public morality. And instead, that function is delegated to the invisible hands. I would insist on pluralizing it. The invisible hands are the key theological and economic, and maybe in a sense even ethnic axis on which Paleo-Liberalism determines itself. And there are huge consequences to that. I'm maybe should just at this point just stop there to say, the Mephistopheles' speech and Adam Smith's statement on the invisible hand are almost identical. They're both saying that the common good is not a deliberate intention at the level of the individual, and it creates the good because of a higher power, because of the fact that it's guided by this religious axis, the empty summit, the fact that there is, to some degree at least, massive constriction and delimitation of what would be an authoritative public moral authority. So that, to me, that's what Paleo-Liberalism is. That is not at all what I think we're seeing now among people who call themselves liberals. Yeah, okay, I should pause at that moment.
Right. Very interesting. Very, very pertinent point. So if we prolong a bit this comparison between Faust and Mephistopheles and Adam Smith, we see a kind of ophitic understanding, or Gnostic ophites, who have realized the kind of the role of the evil in the history. So the role of the history in the evil was misinterpreted according to Gnostics. So it was always wanted. It has always wanted to make evil or indifference toward the good, and at the same time, that was the kind of introduction of secret way to the good. So in that sense, I totally agree with that. So this comparison is absolutely genius, I think, because the capitalism in that Scotland, low church, Calvinist part of Protestantism was something like evil regarding the common good of community. So that was a kind of nihilist attitude, individualistic attitude that finally, when it was a kind of enlarged and projected on the global level, that has prepared the way to something the kind of alternative results. So the expansion of the evil of individualism, egoism, narcissism, nihilism has led to some contrary conclusion. So that is very interesting. So that partly was the thought of Karl Marx, that more capitalism will prevail, the more conditions for revolution, proletarian revolution, socialism will be prepared. And the Marxists, Trotskyists above all, they criticize the kind of Soviet or Chinese will to stop this, to say we have enough of the evil. Now we are going to establish some common goods with this prepared terrain of the capitalist Mephistophelian demonic expansion. So let's stop here, and now we are coming to create something really good. And that failed in the case of the Soviet Union because we tried to say enough with capitalism, but we had not enough of capitalism. So we were much more traditional society. So that was maybe the reason why we have failed with the socialist experience. But what is interesting, so in China's case, capitalism, it considered to be evil that could be turned into the good, and because of cultural, I think, identity. So Chinese society has succeeded in that. So using Mephistopheles as the kind of horse to bring to the goodness, so and the prosperity. So I think that, but nevertheless, the main idea that capitalism is evil and that could bring the good is very, very important, I think. So we could interpret that with the Marxists or outside of Marxists. We are not obliged to follow them. We could just point out that there is a logic very, very close, I think, near to that. And but idea to reduce the liberalism to Paleo-Liberalism and to unite it with ethnical Anglo-Saxon ambience, I think that will inscribe very well in a multipolar process. If English men prefer to be such, it's your decision, it is your destiny, it is your free will to build your society on the principles you share. So that is absolutely legitimate case, I think. The other thing, if you oblige the other to follow the same example against the will, that is something completely different, I think. Maybe this idea to reduce the liberalism to its paleo origins, the paleo-liberal form, it could be very good acceptance in the world, but more exclusivist liberalism is, the better for the humanity, I think, and better for Anglo-Saxons, British people as well. It's your destiny, it's your culture, it's your particular response to the answer or challenge of history, and you could defend it, you could insist on that, but when it comes outside some normal, organic, natural limits, it became something different. That is my point.
Sure. I mean, as a side note on this, I think the Chinese case is very interesting.